I want to talk about the Klonoa remakes because I'm kind of fucking sad, dude. Like, I'm not feeling the best
As a
because of it.
whole, was the first game better than the remake?
Not really. I gotta be honest. Aside from like the character models more resembling what they used to look like, and the original dialogue, literally nothing else has changed. It just like looks prettier. It controls worse, looks worse, has the worst presentation than the original, really disappointing. Yeah, I need to emphasize though that most of these issues are not this remake's fault. They all come from the remake. The controls are like exactly the same as the remake, which like in my video I didn't talk about them much because I thought it was like, you know, subjective. Like there are people who do prefer it because like it's not as quote unquote slippery as the original. But like as I was playing it, like there was so many points where I was trying to do like more technical platforming maneuvers to get like the gems in the correct order or whatever, and I just wasn't able to do stuff I was able to do in the original because the hitboxes and the level layouts were like slightly altered, and it was really fucking frustrating. And I also just noticed a lot of small quirks about Klonoa's movement in general that make it like just miserable to play.
Not to mention they didn't remove the gems, so you actually have to jump to get some of the gems you would have been able to get.
Yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion that in the remake, Klonoa's like height is a lot taller than the original, and in this new one they made him like short again. And I have a sneaking suspicion that they didn't actually alter any of the level geometry to match Klonoa's height. They just like plopped him in there because there's so many instances where like I should have been able to grab an enemy from a standpoint, but I can't. I have to jump and get it. And there's like so many like points where like gems are like slightly too high for the hitbox, so I have to jump to get those. And yeah, it's kind of frustrating. Would you even want to Klonoa 3 with the current circumstances regarding this? Okay, I'm going to talk about Klonoa for a while because I played it yesterday and got really upset, and then I had to just sleep on it, so I'm going to talk about my thoughts. To answer your question, yes, I would want a Klonoa 3. So, here's the rundown. Klonoa on PS1 is pretty much like a perfect game to me. I think it's excellent. The presentation is like immaculate. Gameplay, you can really tell it was made by the people who mastered 2D platforming in the 16-bit era. It's so fluid and fast and like quick to get to grips with, and it's so much fun. The story is like really, really good because it's like told in like such a great way. It starts off like really simple and really charming, and like it really hinges on your connection to the characters and world, which is really easy to fall in love with because of how charming it all is. And then like more stuff happens as the plot develops, and like it ends like really, really satisfyingly, and like really leaves an impact. And most of it is down to not the actual individual story beats, it's mostly down to the presentation and how the story is conveyed. So, when it was remade for the Wii, I think a lot of the point was missed in so many design aspects. So, I did a whole video going over like the more notable differences between the original and the Wii remake. And the presentation just on the whole is like lacking so much polish. Like I think this is the problem because like the original, like most of its like cutscenes were like the characters were sprite based, and the remake is like, well, it has to be modern, let's make it all 3D. So a lot of like the expression wasn't possible because they were using 3D models that had to be actually rigged and, you know, made to like express the way that they used to be able to do in sprite form. When you're working with sprites, like you have like so much more range of expression than you do with 3D models. And I noticed when playing this recent remake, which was present in the Wii remake as well, that during like dialogue and cutscenes and stuff, most of the movement that's happening from the characters is just like default animations where like they just like, you know, they're just like moving in place, or like it's like, you know, when like in an RPG when a character's talking, they just like move their hands to imply, you know, like just to have something moving on screen, like what they're actually moving isn't actually indicative to anything they're actually saying. The same sort of thing is happening in Klonoa with like everything pretty much. There's not much like actual tailor-made animations to fit like the scenario. Most of it is like stock animation. And that really comes to a front when like you're in like the latter half of the game and like shit's getting like really serious, and it's just like your characters just aren't emoting very well, you know. On top of that, stop being a dickhead. On top of all that, you've got like the issue of like the 3D models not being nearly as expressive purely because they're 3D models. But here's the thing though, Klonoa 2 didn't have this problem, and those were 3D models. Like the eyes and the mouths, especially for Klonoa in the first game's remake, they have very little range of expression. His, like, there's nothing like, he doesn't like have eyebrows to like, you know, give a glare or anything like that. Instead they just like lower his eyelids, and it looks really bad. In the remake, his default mouth was like a smile, but which made it really annoying in a lot of instances. But in the new one, they changed it to like more of like a cat mouth sort of thing, where it's like a half triangle that's upside down sort of thing. So it looks like he's just like, you know, like an idle facial expression. But the problem is like, well, one trick, okay. The problem is like when he's talking, like the default shape of a smile is still there for some reason. Like it's really hard, it's really weird and hard to explain, but like if I showed it to you, you'd understand immediately. But like they didn't have this problem in Klonoa 2. They just like had his mouth move any way it needed to. Instead with like the first game's remake, like they like had his mouth molded to only have like a couple ranges of expression. You've got like a default facial thing where it's like just like normal, and then a smile, and that's pretty much it. That's like the only range of expression he can do with his mouth. Like he can bare some teeth every now and then, but like the rest of his face can't match that. Like the only thing that happens is his eyelids go down a little bit. It's like, oh, it's like, and so like in the more serious scenes, like when he's supposed to look upset or something, or like angry, he just looks bored. Like, broski, come on. Man, I'm really like rambling here. I can't remember what the exact points I was trying to make. Yeah, the presentation was just absolutely neutered in the Wii remake, and those issues carried over to the new remake. One of my biggest issues that I pointed out in my video I did was the script changes and the voice acting in the Wii remake. They were really bad. They gave Klonoa very, very little dialogue. In the original game, like him and his sidekick Hupo talked pretty equally. Like they would both like comment on the situations with each other. They both talk to each other, and talk to the characters they met along the way. They felt like real friends, you know? In the Wii remake, Klonoa does like zero talking, and Hupo does pretty much all of the dialogue. And the voice acting, just on the whole, I did not like very much. Like the original voice acting was like pretty much perfect. Like there was so much charm to it. But thankfully in the new remake, they replaced the Wii version's voice acting with the original, and the original script, which is great. But that introduces a different problem where they didn't actually fully commit to this, because they didn't properly reanimate the dialogue scene, like the dialogue cutscenes, to match the original script. So there is like mad pacing problems now, where there is like literal like 3 to 4 seconds between lines of dialogue where it's just dead air, and it's so awkward and stilted. It's like, ugh, like come on. And like this happens throughout the entire game. Like it's not just like a couple cutscenes here and there at the start or anything. It's like the whole game is like this, and it's really bad. It's really hard to like stay interested in the cutscene when like you've read like 5 words, wait 3 seconds, and then get to read 2 more words to finish the sentence. Like, come on. And another problem, so like, alright, this one really grinds my gears, and it's something that I failed to mention in my video for some reason. Maybe I just didn't notice it as much back then when I made it, but one really cool thing about the original game is that there was a massive emphasis put on music. there was a music track for every level. And there was a lot of unique music tracks specifically for cutscenes with like interacting with specific characters. You'd only hear that song once ever, and the song's length was pretty much fit to that interaction. And the problem with that is like when your cutscenes are dragging on for fucking ages and not going anywhere, the song stops and there's like 3 seconds of silence and then it just starts up again, and it's so like takes you out of the experience so hard when the cutscene music is supposed to like play for the whole cutscene and then end once like you've finished watching the cutscene, but instead it's like it has to loop because the cutscene's now take an eternity. And that's something that really could have fixed in the new remake with the old dialogue that was tailor-made for that song, but they didn't fix the cutscene animations or pacing, so the songs have to loop. Otherwise, you just have silence, and it does not fit very well at all. And it really pisses me off. It's yeah, and it's a bad loop at that because it doesn't actually loop. It just like the song stops because these songs weren't meant to loop. They were meant to like play for the duration of that cutscene and then finish, because you'd never hear that song again in the game because it was only meant for that one interaction and for that short amount of time. Like some of these songs are like 50 seconds long because the cutscenes are short. But here, because the cutscenes drag on for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, when they don't need to, the song just has to like hard cut for a few seconds, and then it can start again. And it's like, what are you doing? And you know what? They did this in the fucking credits as well. They did it in the credits. For some reason, there's like a little message at the very end of the, like a little bit of text at the very end of the credits, and for some reason they gave the player the chance to like press X to like continue to finish the credits for some reason. And instead of the song just finishing when it's supposed to, it starts up again. I was fucking fuming when that happened. Oh my god, it was so bad. And you know what? This is all stuff that I've seen in like many games before, like, you know, like looping of the song during a cutscene and stuff like that. And it hasn't bothered me because like it's not a big deal. But when you're remaking a game that did this stuff better on the fucking Sony PlayStation in like 25 years ago, and you do it worse, and you're meant to be like, this is meant to be like replacing the original experience because the original game isn't available anywhere to buy on contemporary consoles. Ooh. It's bad. It's real bad.
Misa Gungan Boss.
And like there's just like so many other like small things that like just add the fuck up, like so many visual effects and sound effects that are just like cool as hell that they just didn't do because I don't know. Like, so for instance, I'll take the boss health bars, all right? Something not very important in the grand scheme of things, but in the original they were cool as hell. So basically what it was is like in the top left corner, it was like a little circle, like a blue circle thing. And had like what looked like a flame in the middle of it. It was kind of cool looking. And then you'd have the health bar next to it. And what it was like a hexagon shaped 3D like cylinder, like in the shape of a hexagon that would like spin around. It was like slightly transparent, and it was like I think it would change colors, or it was just like the one color, but like it looked cool as hell. And when you hit the enemy, it had like this really satisfying sound effect, which is thankfully still in the remake. And the health bar would then turn red and shrink. And then when you killed the boss, like the health bar would shatter into as if it was glass, and it was cool as fuck. Like, this is like the smallest of details, right? But it was really cool. But in the remake, they've got instead is at the bottom they've just got like a health bar with the name of the boss, and like it would just like the health bar, like, it looks cool, like, has, like, some cool, like, effect on it, and it's kind of shiny or whatever. But then, like, when you beat the boss, it would just, like, shrink and disappear. Come on. Can you be any more generic? That's my problem. There's so much of this remake that is just generic, whereas the original was, like, excellent, you know? And it was 25 years ago. Oh... It's shit like this that it's like, I don't like remakes as a whole anymore, I don't think. I think they're wholly unnecessary, and they just stand to lose more than they have to gain, I think. Especially with how easy it is to fuck it up, you know? I'd much rather the original experience that people are already attached to, just like, with a, like, you know, updating the resolution. And just making it playable on current platforms. I don't know if that's all I've got to say. I'm planning on making like a short review to put on my second channel about the whole package. But, yeah. Keep in mind, again, like, most of these issues are to do with the, like, stem from the Wii remake. The team behind the Fantasy remake did do their best to try and, I don't know if they did their best, but they did certainly try to make it more faithful to the original, especially with, like, using the original voices and the old character design, which is great. But you can't, they didn't fix the base, nowhere near close to it. But from what I've seen, Klonoa 2 looks pretty great, so I'm really excited to get playing that probably tonight. Oh yes, to revisit the question that started this whole rant, Yashwan. Despite like all this, would I still want a Klonoa 3? Yes, of course. Again, like most of these issues I have with this first game stem from a remake that came out like over 10 years ago and missed the point completely, in my opinion. Klonoa 2 is still a great game, and the remake seems to have like adapted it pretty well. And like the core gameplay loop and like this world is still like excellent. It's just a shame that like people's like introduction to this series are going to be through like the really inferior version of that excellent game. But I would still really love to see a new game because like, I mean, honestly, I would have preferred if this wasn't like a full-on remake and was just like, they just ported the originals in like a HD collection or whatever, but it was still the originals, and then like they made a third game. I would have much preferred that instead of like just giving us old games again, you know? Especially when they're of inferior quality like this. Need a bigger team or at least more time resources. Yeah, this was very clearly a budget title because Klonoa has not done very well financially in the past. So they didn't want to like risk losing a lot of money on this. And I was looking at the credits. I think I saw like under the programmers, I think there was like 5 people, which is fucking crazy. You mean the thing where the RPG pro tag stretches their hands out to not fully raise their palms up and down a little? Yeah, exactly. Like just think of Xehanort in Birth by Sleep, how he just like does that and then like goes back to his standing his standing position. A lot of that stuff, just like canned animations. Like they'll make the animation outside of like the cutscenes and then just like put it in the cutscenes where they need to. There was very, very little custom animations to fit the actual scenes they were trying to do. And it is very noticeable, especially towards the latter half of the game where like, you know, shit's getting like emotional and characters need to emote and they just kind of don't. I get the vibe that he didn't trust the devs any longer. It's not the devs of the new remake. It's not their fault, you know. It's they inherited the bad design decisions of the Wii version. So I don't know really what I expected. I was hoping they'd like try to make it like really good and I'd have my expectations like blown. But no, it was essentially just like a prettier port of the Wii version with different character models and the original script, and that was like literally it.
Yeah, but from the sounds of it, like you said, with like the 5 programmers and stuff, it's like, what were you really expecting?
Yeah, like I don't think they gave him much budget at all, which is really a shame. 5 people, no wonder there were those shortcomings. They probably put more effort into Klonoa 2 since one already. Yeah, exactly. I think most of the effort went into Klonoa 2, which like is great. Like Klonoa 2 is a great game, but I'd much rather they just gave us an emulated version of 1. Like, come on, or at least just like include the original version. Like PS1 emulation is easy as shit, and the game is like only 300 megs. Like that is nothing these days. Would you take no remake from all those years ago? Just have a better... Oh yeah, for sure. I don't see any... Aside from like people getting introduced to the series from the remake, I don't see any positives from that remake, to be honest. Like literally the only thing that I think purely comes down to preference and isn't like objectively bad or detracts from the original is like how the game feels to play. Because Like it, Klonoa 1, see, even that I think is like a bit iffy. The original version had a really interesting momentum system where like if you were running down a slope, he would speed up, and if you were running up a slope, he'd like take a little bit longer because he was running up a slope. And that made for some really interesting and fun like exploration and traversal. One of the side effects of that though is sometimes he would kind of slip off edges if you were carrying too much momentum, which meant like you had to let go of the movement, like of the directional button, like as he landed, otherwise you might slip off a ledge. Like, but admittedly this is not a huge deal until like the later points of the game, but even then, like as long as like you're aware of it, it's not very hard to get the hang of. But I see a lot of people say that they prefer the remake because it doesn't have that issue. But just from like my time of playing it yesterday, I noticed like other issues that just made it feel really sluggish to play and nowhere near as fluid as the original. But I'd have to, I think I gotta do a bit more investigating into seeing if what I think is happening there is actually happening. But like from what I think is happening and what it feels like, whenever Klonoa lands from a jump, he kind of stops for a split second. Like his momentum halts, and then he picks up again when like after that half second or whatever, and it feels really stop and start, nowhere near as fluid. And same with like throwing an enemy, he seems to stop a bit longer than he should. Like he seems to halt. I don't know, the whole thing just doesn't feel nearly as fluid. And again, like the issue of I don't think they actually adjusted the level geometry to fit Klonoa's new hitbox is like hilariously bad. The remake didn't make much of a difference in terms of popularity. Klonoa already had a large cult following beforehand. Oh yeah, true. Like the remake sold fucking piss poor as well. So, yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of people that were introduced with the remake. Then again, like in my time, like in my short amount of time in the community, I have met a handful of people who said that they were introduced to Klonoa through the remake, which just makes my soul hurt, to be honest. And you know, like it's one thing to just like play a bad game or like a bad adaptation, like a remake of a game you already love, which is why like when I played the remake, it was like, wow, this is really bad, and I was like kind of laughing at how bad it is, and I made that video just to like to compare them. But now playing the new remake, it genuinely just fucking like ruined my day, to be honest, because it's like, man, so many people are getting introduced to Klonoa through this new collection, which is great. I'm glad there's going to be new Klonoa fans, and it seems to be selling really fucking well, which is really awesome. But like it's laughably bad at points. Like the presentation and the way it conveyed its story was like perfect, and the things that they did in the story is really hard to get right without it feeling ham-fisted or forced or amateurish, and that's exactly what this remake is at points, and it sucks because it sucks. It's really bad. It makes me really upset that like this is people's like exposure to this, like this first exposure to this story. They're not going to get like that, the proper version of it, you know. And it's like people's first playthroughs of a game and a story are like really important because, you know, they set expectations and impressions. And if this is people's first impressions, yeah, I don't know.